starts off with both the opportunity and the privilege to take a long overdue, introspective look at one of the world's truly great classic light airplanes. This show deals with that airplane, the incredibly capable, yet simple flying phenomenon, the Piper Super Cub. I don't know if you ever shook when aeronautical genius C.G. Taylor made the acquaintance of oil magnate and businessman William P. Piper, but it should have, because the result of their getting together, the Piper Aircraft Corporation, was one of the most significant happenings in the history of general aviation in this country. While the relationship between Taylor and Piper was relatively short-lived, the company they founded ultimately produced in 1937, with substantial design input and influence from Chief Engineer Walter Gamino, the famous Piper J3 Cub. This is a model of the J3 Cub, with the J standing for Chief Engineer Gamino. The word Cub became such a famous generic name that it has been applied by the average non-flying layman to describe just about every light plane passing overhead. To say that the J3 became a benchmark aircraft is, like the airplane itself, a classic understatement. Relative to the subject of this show, however, the J3 provided the basic configuration, the classic Cub look, which over time has evolved from that first low-power J3 to the final version 150 horsepower PA-18 Super Cub, or the PA-18A Super Cub, as it is known in its agricultural version. The famous Piper Works at Lock Haven, Pennsylvania, turned out the first flapless 90 horsepower version of the Super Cub in 1951. The people that built the Super Cub and the company that sold it breathed life into what has become much more than just another aircraft. The Super Cub is a happening, with tubing, fabric, and aluminum welded, glued, and screwed together on the sweet spot to create an aircraft that is larger than life, an aircraft whose whole is truly greater than the sum of its parts. Sit back and enjoy this show, entitled simply Super Cub.
The Piper Super Cub has for years been the personalized workhorse for thousands of individuals who required a small, high-performance aircraft which would lend itself to the specialized needs of pilots who demanded what only the Super Cub could deliver. Over the years, there have been people who had visions of what this outstanding aircraft could achieve when enhanced with their ideas and improvements. One of these people is F.Atlee Dodge of Anchorage, Alaska. With over 51 years of experience in the aviation field, which began in the Army Air Corps during World War II and continued with the famed Flying Tigers after the war, and then on to a career with Western Airlines, it is no wonder that Atlee Dodge is regarded among his peers as an aviation guru.
I've been on this hill for 36 years.
36 years. And specializing in the Super Cub most of that time?
Most of the time, yeah.
What was the reason you zeroed in on the Cub?
Money.
Money? Okay.
I'm primarily a sheet metal man, and although I hold both licenses, and I decided that I wanted to go back into sheet metal, but didn't have the money.
I see.
It took a lot more equipment than I could afford, so
we're talking about lack of money as the reason you got into the Super Cub business.
Atlee Dodge is considered by many today to be one of the key contributors to the advanced performance and increased capabilities which the Super Cub possesses. F.Atlee Dodge is known throughout Alaska and the entire aviation world as Mr. Cub. His relationship with the Super Cub has been long-term and successful, and has seen a number of designed and engineered modifications for an aircraft that Atlee refers to as simply a good airplane.
Well, we have displayed here on the lawn a wide array of these enhancements and parts, Super Cub parts that you make. Can you tell us about some of these?
yeah. This one here, this is a headliner, and it goes in the Super Cub. This we've had out for a number of years. This fits in around the window, the side window, and it's pretty simple to put in. We always tell everybody they can have their wife put this one in.
What does it accomplish?
It gives you more headroom, and it gets rid of that cloth up here, particularly when you're hauling freight or hunting. You throw a moose quarter back there, the leg goes through the headliner, it doesn't go through this one.
Oh, I think that's a pretty good idea not to have that particular problem. Well, I've got an idea what this is, Atlee. These are the famous Dodge long-range gas tanks?
Yeah, this is our 30.5 gallon tank that goes to Super Cub, and It's pretty well constructed. We have 2 full baffles in it.
2 baffles. Huh?
And then there's stiffeners between each baffle. And we changed the filler neck from a flush cap to a raised cap, which I think is a better deal. You can have a choice of electric sending units or for sight gauges.
Oh, either or, an option.
Either way.
Oh, that's interesting.
And
This requires 2 bays in the wing to accommodate this.
Yeah, about a bay and a half.
About a bay and a half.
About a bay and a half.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course, these are our.
You're pretty proud of these, aren't you?
Yeah, these are our float fittings. These are weld on. Nice thing about this, when you put them on, putting the floats on in the springtime, it always lines up. You can't get it out, so it's not going to do any damage to anything.
I see. Those are obviously a permanent installation at the time of rebuild, is that correct?
Yeah, it's a good idea. Well, you can do it. If a good TIG welder won't have to remove much fabric to put these on.
Okay.
And then, of course, we have those safety cables down there that...
That's an important thing. Let's take a look at those.
Yeah. Now, these go on the gear from right here up to here, which would be behind here, see? And then up the top, we have these. And they're made from 1/4-inch cable and stainless steel fittings.
And the purpose of which is to...
Well, if any of this stuff breaks here, any of this breaks, these will catch it.
And stay the prop, basically.
Yeah, if they weren't on there and you broke any of these, you would probably get the whole top deck assembly, the wing, the struts, and be a pretty expensive rebuild.
Well, this is a pretty inexpensive safety precaution in light of all the potential damage that could be done.
Yeah, it's pretty good insurance, really.
Well, Atlee, we're at the point where we're down to one of your skis. Let's take a look at that.
Yeah, this is our ski. It's a 2500 ski. It should be a little higher rated, but we're just too lazy. And it has a plastic bottom. It's actually a 1/4 inch of plastic.
For the purposes of which are to
keep it from freezing down, and it's slicker.
I noticed some pretty sharp edges here as well.
Yeah, yeah, they're good skis. They're strong, very strong skis. Strongest one on the market. There's 36 pieces of ash laid in here, and then there's 2 layers of AA marine. And then, of course, this pedestal is made out of 4130 tubing. And we use a nylotron bushing in it.
Come again on that bushing? Nylotron?
It's a nylotron. It's a nylon type material. It's made for bearings. It's self-lubricating.
In cold weather as well, obviously.
Yeah. And then it comes with the rigging for whatever airplane you're buying it for. And we use springs instead of bungee cords. We have several different springs.
The bungee cords lose their elasticity, I guess, in cold weather. Is that the reason for that?
Oh, they do.
Yeah,
they do.
It's a nice little touch here. I see you've, when this thing's installed, the axle course goes through here, and with snow on top of the stanchion, it gets pretty slippery, and I suspicion that this non-skid material is for the purpose of keeping you breaking your neck.
Yeah, this is non-skid on here, too.
Oh, great touch.
Yeah.
These are quite a set of skis. What's the weight of these, Atlee?
Well, they're 15 inches wide and 72 inches long, and they weigh about 44 pounds. Most all your skis in that category are about the same weight.
About the same weight. Mm-hmm. Need to be about that same weight to give you the strength.
Holder of multiple supplemental type certificates for SuperCub replacement parts and modifications, Atlee Dodge and Enhanced Utility SuperCubs are synonymous. Colorful, opinionated, and revered, F.Atlee Dodge in the SuperCub world is the final word.
Thanks very much, Atlee.
I appreciate it.
After visiting with Atlee Dodge, it became readily apparent why the aviation community refers to him as Mr. Cub. In addition to the many SuperCub enhancements and modifications which come out of his shop, manufactured incidentally to benchmark standards for such efforts within the trade, he possesses encyclopedic knowledge of the innards of the SuperCub. This knowledge, and as it is applied in the field, help keep the efficiency of the old SuperCub at a modern-day peak. One of the improvements that resulted in a quantum leap forward in regard to smoothness and reduced takeoff rolls has been the development of a longer, specially designed propeller.
Several people have had considerable input in this area of designing a prop specifically for the Super Cub. However, Master Cub mechanic Roger Bohr was on the ground floor of development in this area. Roger was one of the few who realized the importance of such a prop and did something about it.
And what it did, now you see normally you'll have a shorter prop. This prop is 82 inches long. Now the original prop that belongs in that airplane, like this one right down behind you, is a 74-inch prop. And if you'll notice a difference in this prop, you take it out here. This prop is like grabbing an old board. This prop is very flexible, and the reason for that is to have the prop when at full RPM is to have the prop to kind of reach forward, which in essence changes the pitch a little bit on it, and as it comes back as the airplane catches up with it, after the initial thrust, it flattens out and gives you or not flattens but fattens up and gives you a fairly good cruise. Now,
Kind of a compromise.
it's kind of a compromise. All fixed pitch props are a compromise. There's no way in the world that you can have a fixed pitch prop that's optimum. This one is optimum on takeoff and climb. This prop, at the same RPM as the Sensitive 52 pitch, pulls 1.5 inches less manifold pressure.
Wow.
Consequently, it pulls just approximately a gallon and a half an hour less gas. Now, this isn't something that I ran tests on to prove. I've had several of my customers come out here and start telling me about that. The first one, I almost called him a liar. And then the other ones kept coming telling me the same thing. And the prop, as you know, is very flexible.
Now, that's part of its inherent design.
That's part of the inherent design, with the way it was designed to be flexible. And as such, it takes a lot of the vibration out of the propeller.
The enlarged disc area and the braking effect inherent in this propeller arc provide significant advantages in low-speed approaches and short landings.
It's been a while since I figured it out, but it seems to me it's about 1,250 square inches more disc area. And I had a few of the amateur pilots that I sold props to, came back and boy, they were kind of hot. They said they were having a hard time making the runway. They're used to what the instructor told them. When you come to this point, you chop your throttle, you go out so far, you come over, you come back in again and land.
Right.
And you don't touch your throttle until you hit the ground.
Circuits and bolts.
Yeah. So they would do that, and it'd be landing over here someplace instead of here where they belong. And so I went out and ran a couple of tests on it. Sure enough, that's the way it worked. I said, well, and now if you learn to fly, you'll learn to use your throttle. You can carry the thing a little bit further. Don't go by what you were instructed at your schools. Go by your common sense. And the bush pilots, they all like that because they come in over trees. They used to have to sit up in a steep slip to get over these trees. Now they can bring it right on over and land. And usually this prop is about 2450 is what they allow for static RPM, as I remember my papers, which I haven't looked at for quite a few years. But as I say, they lose about 3 miles an hour, maybe 4 or 5, according to. Have a tendency to over-pitch their props.
Okay.
If you got a 52, it might be 52 and a half. Under-pitches.
Underpitch.
And if you get them both perfect, there's hardly any loss at all.
Oh, I see.
But if you get them like they normally come out, you'll lose, I say, 3, maybe 4 or 5 miles an hour. But because of the fact that you're pulling less power out of the engine at the same RPM, and you're burning less fuel, most of the guys will push up 50 to 100 RPM more. They get the same speed out. They're still burning less gas than they were.
Just crank them up to despite the pitching.
Yeah.
Right.
When thing sounds right, you leave it there. And the prop is much quieter in the cockpit and outside the cockpit than the standard one is, than standard prop.
It throws a high-frequency resonance outside the area of the audio area.
And also they find out that at low speeds, you have a little bit better aileron control. And the reason for this, the sensitive prop has a tendency on the vortice, comes off the prop, comes in, and then starts out, and it'll catch about 2/3 the flaps.
I see.
The one here comes off and goes out and catches about the first, up to about the first hinge of the aileron, which gives you a little help there. A little help. Because, a Super Cub is not an aileron airplane.
No, it's not. It's a rudder airplane.
It's a rudder airplane. Right. You lose a wing, you don't worry about that stick. You just kick the rudder over and bring it back up again.
Yeah, you're fine.
The hours spent with Roger Bohr offered not only a profile on the performance-enhancing long Super Cub prop, but also provided precious insight into the aviation scene in Alaska. Certainly colorful, always ready with an anecdote. Roger Bohr, part of the old guard, and a Super Cub man.
Others in the modification field have contributed to the longevity and continued use of the Super Cub by offering such major componentry as complete fuselage replacements. Built entirely of stronger 4130 chromoly tubing and welded in precision master fixtures, this legal fuselage transplant can expand infinitely the lifespan of one of the most practical and unique aircraft to ever lift its nose skyward. These assemblies carry full parts manufacturing authorization from the Federal Aviation Administration. J.E. Soares of Rocky Mountain Airframe in Belgrade, Montana, is responsible for the construction and distribution of these state-of-the-art Cub replacement fuselages.
Rocky Mountain Airframe is a quality source that helps return old Super Cubs to the air. Stronger, safer, better. Univair Aircraft Corporation is a firm who has definitely found a need and has filled it, serving the needs of the light aircraft industry. Their manufacturing efforts, in some cases, provide the only source of part support for some designs. Accommodating and professional, they are a fine example of American light industry at work, while providing a strong boost for the future of the Super Cub.
The Univair Aircraft Corporation was and is a well-known firm which early on realized the importance and demand for part support for a whole range of classic light aircraft. Founded in 1946, Univair today continues a legacy of FAA-approved PMA parts manufacturing that, among other things, is a major key to the continued flyable longevity of the Super Cub. Univair manufactures fully 90% of the structural parts required on the PA-18 in its several versions, including such diverse assemblies as wing parts, complete wing assemblies, tail surfaces, cowlings, wing struts, and tail brace wires, along with a prolific number of smaller parts and components that make up the Super Cub's character. Though again with the Super Cub, the whole is yet greater than the sum of the parts. Univair, with its parts manual and catalog being simply standard operating procedure for Cub rebuilders, addresses a market that includes all 50 states and which is international in scope wherever the venerable Super Cub has found a home. Steve Dyer, president of Univair and son of company founder J.E. Eddie Dyer, presides over the manufacturing and marketing process that, in many instances, is truly the lifeblood for several classic designs. Not surprisingly, the Piper Super Cub is the single most active aircraft for Univair's FAA PMA market. In-house manufacturing does, of course, require sophisticated machinery and subsequently close final inspection. How often does one see a unique machine called a Hubbard stretch wrap as it smoothly pulls the channel around into a curve to form a Super Cub's rear D-shaped windows? What about this sophisticated optical comparator inspecting heavy-duty 5/8-inch strut forks? One part of a huge warehouse indicates an ample supply of both original Piper ribs and Univair stamped ribs. Depending on horsepower, it takes from 13 to 15 ribs per wing to effect a complete rebuild. A production run of Super Cub cowls, struts, landing gears, and replacement tail sections are inspected before stocking and subsequent shipping. With the improvements today that are available for the Super Cub, it would stand to reason that discussions and, yes, even arguments would arise about how one Super Cub would perform against another Super Cub, or even how the Super Cub would stand up against other light, modified bush-type aircraft. Consequently, it occurred to the Copper River Basin Lions Club to devise a competition to answer these questions. What better place to settle these matters than in the controlled environment of class competition? In Glen Ellen, Alaska, pilots annually converge on the Golcana Air Show, where a unique and different competition has evolved. Pilot ability and aircraft capabilities are tested under controlled conditions and within a festive atmosphere. However, much attention is given to safety. The bottom line is how quickly can one break the grip of Earth's gravity and become airborne. In like fashion, pilot skills and knowledge about the capabilities of their aircraft are further challenged as they swing around in a pattern for an attempt at a short field landing, following head-to-head or, as it were, wing-to-wing competition with other airplanes in their class. The contest was spirited and lively. Spectators rooted for their favorites. Pilots pushed their performance envelopes, but did so within the parameters of prudent, safe operation. Gulkana's Air Show is a fun event, and the Copper River Basin Lions Club, in cooperation with the FAA, implemented strong safety regulations to help preclude any mishaps. Some competitors brought highly tuned and specially modified competition aircraft to the event, while most others brought the airplane they fly every day in their various endeavors as bush pilots. In this year's event, harsh and rough weather prevented the arrival of many of the more modified Super Cubs. The winner in the Super Cub category was a working man in a working Cub. Basically unmodified, he used sharp piloting skills, honed daily as a working bush pilot, to carry him to the top spot.
The gentleman here to my right is Chuck McMahon, who won the short field takeoff contest here at the Gulkana Air Show yesterday. Chuck, you looked pretty tough out there yesterday.
No comment on that, I guess.
What was
It
that?
probably did look tough.
Well, I was pretty amazed. That was awfully short. What was your distance?
I think it was 60 feet.
That's incredible. This is not a modified Cub either. This is a straight
No,
working.
it's pretty straight. It's kind of nice to. Usually they got modified Cubs entered in this, and they put us all together. So it's kind of nice to just compete against other stock Cubs. You know.
That is the case. I guess yesterday everybody was in the competition were guys like yourself, outfitters and bush pilots that came together and really didn't do anything other than, I don't think some of these guys didn't even drain any gas out. They just went out there and had at it against each other.
Yeah. Well, Lynn, he's draining gas today, I see, but he was, we left our batteries in and left them pretty stock.
Chuck, I see you got the big tires. Those are what, 30-inch?
Right.
The other modifications inherent other than 30-inch tires are what? I guess the big prop.
The big prop, yeah, it's an extra long prop. Other than that, it's stock. There's not much to do.
This looks from the interior, I can see over the shoulder. The folks I'm watching the show cam, but it looks like that thing's been used.
Yeah, my wife was after me last year to put a new interior in, and so I did, and that's what it looks like this year.
Well, I can attest. You can tell your wife that you've retained some of the local color in there.
Yeah, there's a little red left.
I want to thank you for taking time here. I know that you're going to be participating in the second half of this Bush Challenge, I guess, this afternoon, and I'd like to wish you luck.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Good luck. Okay.
The history of bush aviation is rife with hangar talk of airplanes and legendary pilots. A predecessor of the likes of Chuck McMahon from another earlier era is bush flying ace Jack Wilson. Jack's deep military background led to a post-war vocation that took him to the far corners of Alaskan aviation.
It's 150 horse down here, but up there it's a hell of a lot less. So I would go in flying into an uphill slope and land at full throttle and get over the top and head it downhill again so that I could get moving again.
Oh, I see.
And that's all there was to it, really.
Jack's innovative use of the Super Cub led to establishing high-altitude airstrips, which served as staging areas from which hunters could backpack deep into the mountains. This greater access resulted in the acquisition of the largest mountain doll ram ever taken, a world record.
I took this Harry Swank hunting for a number of years and actually kind of taught him how to hunt sheep. And then finally I sicked him on this big ram that we had known of for 2 or 3 years and that we had hunted and we had looked at very closely, and I knew it was a tremendous ram. And Harry, while he was waiting for me, he went up there and got the sheep very easily just by walking up a little glacier to... he was going to use his spotting scope to blast the mountain from up there on that glacier on the high berm. And while he was walking up the glacier, he ran into the big sheep and just shot him, and that's all there was to it.
Jack Wilson is revered as one of the all-time experts in bush aviation.
Incredible as though it may sound, I understand that you actually landed an airplane on top of Mount Rangel out here.
Well, a number of times. In fact, I made 69 landings up there.
For heaven's sakes.
Over a period of many years altogether for different groups of people.
How high is that mountain, for heaven's sake?
I think it's 14,100 feet high, something like that.
Your takeoff performance obviously suffered because of the reduced power, but what kind of a takeoff run would you experience at that altitude?
Well, it was a long one, a very long one, sometimes a mile, something like that. I know I timed it once. I looked very closely at a detailed map, and I lost 400 feet of altitude on takeoff. In other words, I was going downhill, and with sticky snow, it still took that long to get off.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
But it wasn't dangerous because there was a world of room up there. As long as you knew where you were pointed and you weren't going to go over a cliff, why, you could just enter downhill and away you went.
Let it rip, huh?
Yep, that was the way it went. No one had ever been in some of these valleys before, and had never landed an airplane. And I wanted to get in there, so, well, one time, for example, I dropped a man off on floats on a lake, and he walked 16 miles to get into a place where I wanted to go. And I went up there and airdropped food to him and tools from the air.
Oh.
And he just built me a strip, and then I landed and practically cracked up. And
We're not talking about the Fairbanks International here, then.
and then no, not really. But then we improved the strip so I could take off, and then we had it. And another time I landed on another strip that we already had in use, and I had a man, an old prospector, a good man though. I had him walk way down the mountain to another valley and across the ridge, and again I dropped tools, and he built a strip, and then I flew a wheelbarrow into that one, tied right on the wing, a big wheelbarrow, and we really worked that one over, and we made a pretty good strip out of it. In fact, I had a few people land in there with 180s. I didn't really want them in there, but we made such a good strip that they could get in there too, and they kind of took some of the game. But that's why we had our airstrip.
Kind of a case of what we're doing in that last instance, then, I guess. A little too much of a improvement job.
A little too much of a good thing we did that time.
One of the things that you're noted for, I think, is as regards your use of the Super Cub around here was the distinct lack of any modifications. There's a lot of modifications in some of these Cubs we've seen here at the Gulf Canyon Air Show the last couple of days, but your modifications were pretty moderate, and just a couple of things involved. Let's tell the folks about how you approach that end of the flying business.
Well, I didn't ever have any wing modifications. I never did go to the stole kits or anything like that. The modifications I had was a full IFR panel that I had installed right by the factory in 1960 when I ordered the airplane, so that I could fly on instruments and get somewhere in bad weather. And then, of course, I had the wheel skis, and for summer on wheels alone, I had the big donut tires, the same as they have nowadays. They're almost the same. And that's all the modifications I ever had on the airplane, and I never had any wing modifications at all. I got everywhere that everybody else did, and the airplane did a fine job.
Characteristic humbleness marks the demeanor of Jack Wilson. He is retired, but yet stands tall amongst the ranks of true bush pilots, due to his background, skill, and professionalism, which were probably unparalleled during his active years. Wherever bush pilots meet, in hangars or on ramps across Alaska, the name Jack Wilson is often invoked when the talk turns to superlative flying skills.
He's a world-famous hunter, guide, and outfitter, but foremost, a bush pilot who is second to none. When it comes to flying the bush, with nearly 40 years of experience astraddle the stick of his modified Super Cub, Bill Ellis has flown literally thousands of miles and logged thousands of hours in some of the worst flying conditions the continent has to offer. If living legends really exist anywhere, they exist at Devil's Mountain Lodge in the Wrangell Mountains in south central Alaska. Bill Ellis is indeed a true living legend.
This is what we call Devil's Mountain. Bill, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to show us this magnificent trophy room, which obviously represents a lot of years' effort on the part of you and your family, bring all these great trophies together in one place. And also for giving us a little bit of your time to talk to us about bush flying and Super Cubs in general.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. We're quite proud of it. It represents a lot of the family's time, and
That's a wonderful place.
we really enjoy it, and I'm sure glad you enjoyed it. And I understand that you're here to talk to me a little bit about Super Cubs and flying.
Right.
I'm full of that.
Pretty good topic, don't you think?
You betcha. And all we can do is we can go over to the house where it'll be more comfortable. It's snowing like heck out there anyway.
Okay, let's go on over. Great.
His journeys have ranged from Point Barrow and beyond, from the Arctic ice pack to the Wrangell Mountains, and on to southeastern Alaska's rugged coastal environs.
But the Arctic, I flew quite a few years in the Arctic polar.
How many years up there, then?
I guess I can safely say I flew 14 seasons up there, I guess. I didn't really count that one up either.
You're in the Brooks Range, I understand?
Oh, I hunted the Brooks Range quite extensively in the old days when they had our long seasons, We're getting choked down now. It's the Brooks Range sheep season is the same as ours now, and so it used to be earlier.
Oh, I
We
see.
used to go up there for a short run there. But,
What was about the toughest flying? The Arctic, does that qualify maybe as the toughest you've had?
well, in the early days, there wasn't too many weather reporting places, and there was no such thing as your DMEs, We had some ADFs, but the ADFs weren't as sophisticated as they are now, and it was a different deal, We tried to fly as much contact as we could, and that's one thing that we do, and I want to stress for the importance of learning your country, which will save your life, and especially in the Super Cub. Because, a Super Cub can be flown on instruments, and there's some individuals that are proficient at it. But my idea is in the mountains to never go on instruments, because it's real easy to get drift or get this or that, and you have problems. So what I've drilled into my boys there and myself, and I think something that's maybe contributed to my longevity just a little bit, is what you do is you learn the routes low level. You see a lot of people that fly from point A to point B, and they do it at 5,000 or 6,000 feet.
Right.
Okay, if they get in a difficult situation, and they try to fly it at 300 or 400 feet, they don't know the land.
Yeah, you can't pick up those checkpoints.
Okay, even though you've got a problem, you're trying to get home, you have no place to land, even if your visibility drops down to a mile or even less, if you have flown this continually at 200 or 300 feet, if you see one rock or one malformed lake or one dead tree, you know exactly where you are.
Well, that makes all kinds of sense.
And you keep pushing it that way, and you can And a lot of people say, well, this guy's crazy, you know, he takes all kinds of chances. No, it's a matter of knowing where you're at.
That's the key to it in these mountains.
Yeah, and you keep your visibility, and then, like for instance, you know, if you hang with it a little while, why, there's a place coming up that you can get this thing in. There's a lot of icing conditions a lot of time. Well, a cub will take ice and they will fly with a certain amount. But I have been iced really bad sometimes, and I didn't think the darn thing was going to fly with that much, but I never did know how much was too much.
Oh, that's
You know what I mean? And it really worried me.
Hope you never had to find out.
You betcha. So what we do, like in the mountains here, if we take off, like today would be a beautiful day for it. You take off out there and you start down the valley here. You start collecting ice.
Right.
Well, you watch your leading edges very closely, and it'll collect a little bit on the leading edge. And what's beautiful, and you really breathe a sigh of relief, is the little drops that start running around the leading edge, because you know it's not going to stick. But when the little drops stop,
that's bad.
you think about getting out of there.
Yeah.
You know, go home to mom.
Put it out. Go home where it's warm.
Go home where it's warm. You betcha.
During these many years and miles, Bill Ellis has developed flying techniques that allow him to push the Super Cub to its ultimate capabilities and still retain a margin of safety required for a long and happy life as one of Alaska's true legends.
You try to be a professional, you know, as you go, and you want people to take note. A little highlight that I might mention to you is one time I taxied down to gas up, and I was pre-flying the airplane, and the client come out and brought his gear and everything, and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm looking the airplane over. I'm looking at the ailerons and elevators and going around popping wires like we always do, you know, kick a tire or two and whatever." And he says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm pre-flying the airplane, you know, see if anything's going to fall off or something, you know."
Right.
And he said, "Boy," he said, "you really do believe in taking care of me, don't you?" And I said, "No, I don't really care about you. It's me I'm crazy about."
Well, that's right.
And he looked like he was sort of hurt, you know, and I said, "But you got to realize, if I make it, you're only 2 feet behind me. There's a good chance you might."
Bill, getting back for a minute, if we can, to that conversation we had earlier about low and slow contact flying and weather. Specifically, what are you talking about there?
Well, what we're talking about is getting your aircraft slowed up and trying to get somewhere to where you can get it back again safely. And what you're also trying to do is to remain in contact with the ground, because in the mountains there's no place to get you down, so you have to maintain contact, you know. And it's a lot according to your aircraft. If you're familiar with your aircraft, you know pretty well what minimal controllable airspeed is. And you can basically, like Super Cub, if you are fairly low to the ground, you need a little maneuvering room. Like 45 is comfortable like in my airplane. But all airplanes are different, you know. And so you can't just pin it down and say, "Hey man, do this," you know. There's a possibility that your airspeed might not be average.
Or loaded a little heavy.
And loaded a little heavy. It's according to how you're loaded, and there's lots of contributing factors. And so it's awful difficult to just have a hard, fast rule on where you're going to set this airspeed, you know. And it's all according to your experience and the aircraft. And it takes a while to obtain this, and
10, 15% maybe overstalled.
yeah, something like that. It'd be fine, and you know, and just so it'll work out, you know what I mean. And
The key to this thing is knowing the aircraft and what you're doing.
knowing your aircraft, knowing what the aircraft will do, and then also knowing the country, you know.
Along those lines, you know, we've also at dinner last night, we were talking a little bit about making a turn at the head of a canyon. And you mentioned that there's a kind of a nuance of those turns that a lot of pilots forget about. You want to cover that a little bit?
Well, the only way that I can really explain it, you know, is a lot of guys fly into a canyon and then they realize all of a sudden that the airplane is not going to get over this canyon, so they've got to make a turn. And to me, the best way I can explain it in the country boy language is an airplane just doesn't turn like you call it turn, you know, in your car, you know.
Right.
It always skids. And
Oh, that's right.
especially if it's not properly executed, it's even worse.
Well,
And
that
that's
adds to the problem.
that adds to the problem.
Yeah.
And it's, you know,
You're talking about extra margin in the distance and altitude in that
Absolutely.
condition, and make allowance for that
make
when
allowance,
you
you
do
know.
skid like that coming around.
There's another concept that I try to tell my boys also that I always tried to stress with them years ago when they was learning to fly, is that if you sit, and I don't know how to word this exactly, and I'll try to stumble around a little bit, but if you sit in the airplane and fly it, you're hunting trouble. You got to be 300 or 400 yards out there.
Thinking out ahead, looking out
You got to be 300 or 400 yards out there. You can't be sitting in the airplane. You've got to be 300 or 400 yards out there. And if you're there, well then
You're
stand a lot better chance, you know.
you're doing what you ought to be doing if you're going to be a Cub pilot, I guess. Is that right?
Well, I guess, you know, a lot of these things that, you know, what I say are things that worked for me.
Things from experience, though.
Well, that's not to say that this thing will work for everybody. You know, differences of opinion is what make horse races.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know, I guess the best way I'd say is just know your aircraft, know your country, know your capabilities, and above all, try to do it safely.
You know, we had a real interesting conversation, too, and you were pointing out the fact that you've got a number of cabins scattered around these mountains here, and a lot of them have strips, or a lot of cases you go in a lane where there isn't a strip. Can you kind of cover, let's just say, hypothetically, that we're approaching the ridge somewhere and you want to put it down, or you want to maybe think about landing there maybe more than once, kind of 100. What are you looking at there? What goes through your mind?
Well, what goes through my mind is, first thing I do is look and see if there's some place that I think there's possible to land an airplane.
Right.
So then what I do is I slow the airplane up and I make a slow drag, and the drag will get to the point. Sometimes 1, 2, 3 times. And during the process of this, you try to figure out the wind. You try to figure out how rough it is. You also try to pick your touchdown zone.
Pick your point.
Pick your point as you go, you know. And then you set up on it. And then when you set up on it, my advice is when you set up on it and it feels good, the airplane feels good, you feel good,
Yeah.
it'll work out for you. But if it don't feel good, go someplace else, because it's been my experience, it sure enough won't work out. If you're hesitant a little bit, so what you're doing, like maybe I've said before, you're operating your aircraft to its utmost efficiency yourself also. And if one of the factors is lacking, and
A little bit out of sync, maybe.
Yeah, it just won't work.
You're looking for trouble.
You know, and two, I might remind you again that we was talking about some of my airports. We keep them fairly short, you know. And when you get ready to leave with a client or something, you know, why, unbeknownst to him, why, it looks pretty short, so you don't say anything, you know. And so what you do is you start your takeoff run, and when you get about halfway down it, why, if the airplane feels real good, responsive and everything, you know it's going to fly. But you keep it there and you burn it all up right to the end, a little short place, you know.
Extra margin again?
Yeah, and then the client says, wow, we just barely made it out, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So, but what you've done is you know at halfway down the strip, the airplane is definitely going to fly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you know that another added run, the airplane is going to have that much more forward speed, and it's going to be much more controllable. It wouldn't be unheard of for you to have an engine failure in this particular deal. And then you can aim the thing somewhere.
Right.
But if you stagger off the ground at minimum controllable airspeed, you can't aim it. You are riding.
Yeah, you are the passenger in all the truest sense of the term then.
Right.
Well, I think it's important to reiterate that anyone watching this show has to realize that you're a fellow with 25,000 plus hours in a Super Cub, 30-some years experience, And the things we're talking about, the fact that you do use this airplane on a daily basis, fly it every day at the peak of your operational technique, day in and day out, puts you in a different category. And we're not advocating anything. We're just pointing out the capabilities of a Super Cub flown by an expert under all kinds of varying conditions. That's a pretty fair statement, would you say?
Yeah, that's along the lines that I'm thinking of. I'd really hate for somebody to go out and try to, duplicate what we've done. And that's not to say that I'm really an expert. I don't feel that I am. I feel that I've done this out of necessity.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
So you use this to make a living.
Yes, to make a living. And
right.
You do acquire a lot of experience, like a person driving to work every morning in his vehicle,
Yeah,
he knows the route pretty well, and he does it every day, and this is what we do.
But before we let you off the hook, I'd like to ask you if we could go out to the airplane with you and take a look at some of the lightning things you've done to this thing and the modifications and some of the enhancements. Chance we can do that?
Oh, sure, we can do that.
Bill Ellis's short landing and takeoff techniques have been taught to only a few, including his 3 sons. The legend will continue.
I was out there admiring your Cub earlier, walking around with you, right? You've got that thing stripped down, looks awful light. What does that weigh?
It weighs a little less than 1,000 pounds the way we operate it. When you rebuild it, you try to lighten it up. In other words, you don't put a 16-coat Buick finish on it. And we're talking about just ounces there, but what you're trying to do is build an airplane that's lighter, and we remove the starter and the generator, and it's sort of an inconvenience to hand prop it, but shucks, you can get 80 pounds or so out of it. Well, that's half of the person,
How much is more runway out there?
On the road here?
On the road.
Well, you going to count the bend down there?
Well, let's delete the band. We'll talk about that straight away.
Oh, we could get 700-800 feet, you know what I mean? That's plenty for a Super Cub.
What's the altitude here?
Oh, we're nearing about 2,800 here. Somewhere it's awful hard to tell, and none of the old charts are very accurate,
Bill, how about telling me what's the story on this hood ornament on this Cub?
Well, when I was a kid growing up, I seen all the cars and everything that had hood ornaments, but I never seen an airplane with a hood ornament. So, by golly, I decided that I had to have one. So I put that old girl on there, and now you see an airplane with a hood ornament.
Boy, I sure have. This is the first one, though. What's that ornament off of?
That's off the 41 Cadillac.
1941?
Mm-hmm. Me and that old girl's seen a lot of clouds.
Boy, I'll bet you have.
Yeah, sure.
What do you say we jump up in the airplane and take a look at, talk a little bit about some short field takeoffs?
Okay, by golly, I'll tell you what works for me.
Okay, great. Bill, could you run through some of your short field takeoff procedure in this Cub?
What I do is I roll out in position there and align the aircraft up with the runway, and you apply max brakes and let the engine reach its RPM, and then you apply max throttle and start your takeoff run. And immediately after the aircraft starts to roll, or maybe a fraction before, I lift the tail up for good forward visibility. I love that forward visibility. It may stop the airplane, slow the airplane and take off a little bit. But usually bush strips are narrow, and you want to keep everything in the straight line, what you got planned out. And as I might have mentioned before, is first notch of flaps we always pull because it's handy to you. You don't have to bend down a little guy like me. And after you've had your throttle applied max, well then you drop down to your flap handle, and when you figure the aircraft is ready to leave the ground with enough forward speed to satisfy you, while you apply back pressure and full flaps all at once. And when you lift up clear and everything is looking good, why then you start to release a little of the back pressure if you wish. It's according to what you got coming up, you know what I mean? You need
how much of an obstacle ahead or whatever?
Yeah, an obstacle, or you're in a hurry to get somewhere, or you know what I mean, and you know you're going to have to climb there, so you leave in like I said, I'm a lazy pilot, just what's necessary.
As wide-ranging a bush pilot as any who ever fly the trade in Alaska, Bill Ellis has a lot to say about flying technique and about attention to safety. He will tell you that safety is his paramount concern whenever he saddles up in his Cub. This stance adds to his aura and endorses his credo that flying does not suffer fools. Bill Ellis
One of the world's most accomplished active bush pilots says, and listen closely, think ahead of the airplane. Can you imagine landing a Super Cub on skis at 14,000 feet? How about flying a Cub at 18,500 feet elevation? Is it any wonder that young aviators seek to learn from and follow in the footsteps of a pilot's pilot and true gentleman, Cliff Hudson? A true mentor of many young Alaskan bush pilots, Cliff Hudson came to Alaska in 1948, and since then has made a full-time career out of flying mountain climbers and adventurers to the glaciated flanks of Mount McKinley.
I started learning 1948, and now I'm still learning.
Still learning?
Yeah.
Long time to be learning. Every day is a new day.
Many things. A lot of times you see something different, you know. But some days we don't go flying. We get to sit around and think about it.
Cliff Hudson epitomizes the fact that high-risk flying is only as dangerous as the pilot makes it.
This is a pretty special and most certainly a demanding environment in which you fly. I know that we've got a couple of 185s out here, and you've never had an accident with an airplane that you couldn't fly out, and I think that's remarkable in this type of an environment. How does the Cub itself, being smaller and with a smaller payload, figure into the overall operation here at this flying service?
Well, on the Super Cub, a lot of times a guy will say, "Hey, Cliff, I want to go on this river and we'll borrow. I want to take a load of stuff up there, and some stuff won't fit in the Super Cub. So maybe I'll go up there and find a bar that's suitable to land 185 on, and or the 206, and maybe I could work for a few hours shoveling holes in and moving rocks and brush and stuff like that. Pretty soon I'll have a pretty good electric in there, capable of handling the larger aircraft without causing any damage, hopefully."
Oh, I see.
So it's beneficial to that, and it lands a lot shorter than your 185 does, and you'll get out shorter too. Of course, it weighs a hell of a lot less.
Oh, yeah.
Half the
A lot of power. Half the horsepower. Half the gas, I might add.
Yeah, there you go, yeah. Half the fuel.
What about you use it on Mount McKinley itself? Are there any occasions when that comes into play?
Oh, yeah, I've used it up there a lot of times for airdrops, dropping food supplies and fuel.
I guess these airdrops are conducted by and large solo. Is that correct? How do you accommodate that?
Well, there's no problem on solo. For supplies, I put it in one of these red onion bags are real nice, really, because they're red in color, and I put a little extra tape on it in case it sinks down in the snow, soft snow too far. They can't see the bag, they'll see the tape then. But anyhow, I open up the door when I get ready to make my drop, and getting lined up on them and making sure it's not going to go over top of a ridge or something or hit them. I try to get in, close to them without hitting them. I think we can't, but you get in as low as feasible. Sometimes it's not too feasible to drop too low if you get super strong winds, and just good buffeting, downdrafts, stuff like that. And if you have to try to use good judgment to get it in reasonably close to them without damaging your aircraft. But so far I've been successful on, all my drops without hurting anything or anybody.
Hudson does not take any undue risks, and proof of the pudding is his accident-free safety record, which spans some 44 years of Alaskan flying.
I know that the Cub, as we all know, a Cub has a very low wing loading, and it's subject to bounce around pretty good in turbulence. And I can't imagine a place in the world that would have any more turbulence than Mount McKinley. Can you give us a little perspective on what you experienced in that ride in the thermals in that little airplane?
Well, you're not always positive about which way she's going to go in there, because sometimes the wind comes from all directions at the same time.
Right.
In fact, one time I was in there, it was a Cub, and I picked up some people on one little ridge out not too far from the base camp on McKinley there, 7,200 foot level. But anyhow, I started to go across this valley, and all of a sudden it looked just like a tornado, only it was snow.
Oh.
And it looked like a good 1,000 feet in the air, just a big circle of snow was drowning into my tube, picking it up like that.
Whirlwind type.
Yeah, a big whirlwind, a huge one. Wow. And I just pulled on over to the side. I'm about 2 miles from it there, and I said, hey, I'm not going to get caught in that thing.
No, I guess
I
not.
pulled over the side, went way up around the other side of the glacier there, and I landed up there for about 20 minutes, and the wind seemed to go down a little, and I took off, went down, and got my job done anyhow, and I got bounced around a little bit. There's nothing too uncommon up there.
This flawless record is accentuated by the fact that a large percentage of his work has been at the controls of a modified Super Cub, flying to, landing on, and taking off from North America's highest peak, Mount McKinley.
Mount McKinley is roughly 20,000 feet, is that correct?
Yeah.
I understand from our conversation earlier that you have actually evacuated someone from the slopes of that mountain at the 14,000 foot level, roughly?
Well, yeah, it's no problem there.
Could you give some of the details on that, the type of slope, and what are the circumstances from which that incident evolved? And
Well, there's a basin up there, 14,200 feet, and now, years ago, when there weren't so many climbers up through there, it wasn't so bad, but now there's big pits all over. These guys dig up snow slabs and make their, around their tents and things.
I see the window, sure.
It would be darn dangerous driving that.